What do you make of Dominic Black's testimony so far? He purchased the gun for Kyle Rittenhouse. Now we're listening to him talk about what happened that night. Police are pushing people back. It sounds like no one was injured that he could see. So, what's the prosecution really trying to do here, as far as you're concerned, from a law enforcement perspective?
I think they're trying to determine how dangerous it was in the exact vicinity that they were. These young men went there making a decision that they were going to have an armed presence. They had AR-15s to protect businesses. So when they got there, they were assigned a particular area. He was assigned a rooftop, and he said to him, "Did you plan on using it?" He says, I would plan on using it to protect myself if need be." But when you think about why would somebody be on a rooftop with an AR-15, it would be because of that. If their goal was to protect businesses from arson and damage, then to stand up on a rooftop with a gun basically says, "Do not enter." So I think that was his goal. And I think we're finding out that he was not able to see any of the confrontation with Kyle. And we'll learn that more as that unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. He's made some really good points on this cross examination. And just the fact that he said Kyle wanted to turn himself in. He told him to turn himself in. He wanted to, and he couldn't do it in Kenosha, he says, because they couldn't get to the police department, and they may be viewed as a threat since they had firearms. Lisa, as a former police officer, wow, what are you making of what we've been hearing?
All of that fits the scenario of what was happening that night because of the violent protests, because of the fact that they had weapons and they didn't feel safe actually going to the police department. They had no access to get there at that point. So they did what they should have done, which was turn themselves in as soon as they could. And they went ahead and did that. I think the one part that the defense attorney is bringing up, the fact that he refused to talk to him, his lawyer wouldn't let him speak to him. And I think he has a chip on his shoulder because he did end up talking with the prosecution. So I think right now he's trying to say, you knew he shouldn't have had that gun. You had opportunities to tell him, don't take that gun because he was underage. So I think he's probably leaning toward the way of not having him have an opportunity to get off easy on the charges against him.
Yeah, and Lisa, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Mark Richards was actually asking Dominic Black these things about, have you been promised anything? Are you hoping for probation and not a felony or a time recommendation from Mr. Binger? The assistant prosecutor, Thomas Binger, was kind of nodding his head yes and looking at Dominic Black. Did you notice that?
I did. There was an interesting moment because he was basically saying, like, "Yes, that's true. That's what I'm hoping for," and then kind of reiterated, "Well, I wasn't promised anything, but yes, I would hope to have the least possible sentence based on those charges." So very, very interesting, that piece.
You had some thoughts on that last question about the sling and the strength of the sling holding the gun. Both Kyle Rittenhouse had one of those and Dominic Black. So, talk to us about your thoughts on why Thomas Binger asked that question.
Basically, what the implication is that with the body sling and it's cross your body, it's a crossover position. You only have enough slack in it in order for you to actually use the firearm. So to have somebody try to tug it and pull it away from you, it'd be incredibly challenging. The sling wouldn't just give away, it wouldn't break, it wouldn't crack unless it were cut. Could he have been disarmed? Yes, if they got him on the ground and pulled it out from the top of his head and put his arms through it, et cetera. But the fact in that moment, what he was thinking is what we're going to see once defense counters that argument.
Lisa, what was your take on that? I mean, we all saw that. I mean, obviously, we saw it on television as this was unfolding back in August of 2020. So we saw the chaos. We saw the violence that was taking place, the destruction of property. But what were your thoughts on the prosecutor's opening statement and just the reiteration of the fact that this is the only person who killed anybody during that week?
I would say the defense had an opportunity to say how many people were injured that week because it was over a week long of rioting, complete mob action, mayhem. So let's look at hospitalizations and all the other injuries that people did not succumb to, but actually dealt with. And the prosecution making this statement, there were gunshots being fired, but nobody was hit by them. I mean, that's not good. The fact that there were gunshots was showing that it
Hmm.
was happening and people were in danger of it. So I think right now with pushing forward with the defense saying that this was self-defense, don't know if they're going to be able to get that and hang their hat on that. But we did see a step-by-step video of what he was thinking, Kyle, in those moments. And nobody is going to know what that feels like except for Kyle himself.
Let's bring Lisa Lockwood back in, a crime analyst and former SWAT team member. Lisa, Markeith Lloyd, we've seen this kind of behavior from him before. He wants to be in charge, and he's not. His lawyer is in charge of his defense. So, this is kind of par for the course for this guy.
Yes, he goes off on tangents. We know that. He becomes very animated, very upset about his representation. He wanted to represent himself at one point. We know that. So bringing that forward and talking to the judge, and I like the way that she handled him. Her demeanor was fantastic in saying, is there any other point that you wanted to bring forward that we can put on the record? But then going as far as saying and asking his defense attorney, what happened with that particular case? And he said, she didn't want to testify. She didn't want to help Markeith in that particular instance. So at least it's all going on the record. So in an attempt for him to say that we are going to have a potential mistrial because of his representation, it's all being documented as it should be.